Welcome back to Women of War, and I'm your host, Olivia Nunn. And today I am here with a longtime friend who I haven't been able to catch up with because she's been incredibly busy doing her thing. But today I've got Dallas Knight, who is an Army veteran, an author, and just all around an amazing woman. So thank you so much for spending your time with me, Dallas. And I can't wait to get in and dig into your story.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the time.
Yeah, so like I said, you're an Army veteran, you have some time in boots, and then afterwards you went in and did you're an analyst, and you've got a very unique story, and you wrote a book, you're doing all these amazing things. So let's just kind of start with the beginning. When did you come into the Army? What did you do in the Army? And what is a little bit of your story?
Yeah, it's interesting because I graduated high school at 17 and was kind of at this crossroad of I didn't know what to do. I knew that I wanted to get out of my mom's house. It was a very toxic household, kind of chaotic. And by the time I figured out that grades and your family stature had such an impact in your launch into your adult life, it was kind of too late. So I come from a military family. My grandfather served in 3 wars, my uncle, Vietnam veteran, and I had several older cousins that were in the military. So when I was looking at pursuing my career, which at that time, I can't remember exactly why I wanted this. I mean, I know some, but anyway, I wanted to be a DEA agent. And 2 of the qualifications for that were a bachelor's degree and real world experience. So I knew I needed to get into school, but my grades did not afford me any scholarships. I did not have, any family money. So I decided that I was going to go in the military and have the Army help me pay for my bachelor's degree, and that I would also get real world experience. And with that, I joined to be a military police officer. I feel like it aligned with what I wanted to pursue. And all of this went down just 2 months prior to 9/11. So I really didn't know what I was getting myself into. I didn't know the impact that my military service would have, or that I would be part of a war-driven military. And I was part of a delayed entry program and not set to go to basic training until January of 2002. So I figured I would, fit in a semester of college, and that's what I did. And 9/11 happened. I was actually in school, and I knew when that happened, I remember actually calling my mom and saying, I'm going to go to war. And she was like, you're crazy. Like, that's nuts. Like, girls don't go to war. They don't do those things, right? Little did I know at the time, women have been serving in combat since, World War II.
Yeah, absolutely. So interesting. You made one comment, and I just wanted to make a note for the listeners that you said that you chose the military to afford college. Mm-hmm. And honestly, a lot of people come into the military to do that. And in fact, what is an unknown information about the United States military, particularly the Army is the largest institution that affords scholarship opportunities to college. So if you are listening and you're wondering, how do I afford college? I would highly looking at the United States Army. I mean, I know you're biased, I'm biased, we've both being Army vets, but
yeah.
The second part you talked about is that when you called your mom and you're like, I'm going to war, and your mom's like, girls don't go to war. We've been at war. I mean, we've been in war. Women have been in war all the way back to the founding of our country. All the way back to the Revolutionary War. Yeah. Women have been there, whether we were legally allowed to be there or not. We have been there. We have been present. Right. So talk to me. So now you find yourself in boots, you're in uniform, and our landscape has changed, right? Because of 9/11.
Yeah.
What did you think you were getting into because the Army had changed?
Honestly, at that age, I didn't really know. And I think my very naive mindset was a blessing in disguise. I didn't have expectations. And so I just tried to learn as much as I could. I tried to train to the best of my ability. I tried to soak everything in that I was being taught through basic and AIT, and then eventually going to my unit and preparing for deployment. I took it very literal and serious. But at the same time, I was, 18, 19 years old. So it was just this very naive mindset where I embraced my training, but really had no idea what was in store for me. And to be quite honest, I didn't know that I was going to come home. So in that time frame, I really was just living my life to the fullest, thinking, I'm going to get deployed. We're going to go overseas, and who knows what's going to happen, but I don't really have any responsibilities or anything to come home to. So I'll just make the best of it.
As you were saying that, that made me reflect on when I left for my first deployment. I did 3 to Iraq in 2003 because we knew it was coming, and we were steadily trying to prepare. And it was always this hurry up and wait, like, nope, you're going, because our stuff had already left on the containers, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to get on a plane. No, you're not going to get on a plane. You're going to get on a plane. You're not going to get on a plane. And we never knew if we were coming back, right? There was like this big question mark. And you're absolutely right. Every single day was like this one more beer, this last pizza slice, this, you're living life to the fullest because you had no idea. So you came in as a military police. What was life like for you when you came in, and where did you find yourself?
Yeah, a lot of people associate, any type of police job with the traditional, in the military we call it garrison, but in the civilian life, just like the regular like police officer you'd see on the street. And yeah, I trained for that, but my unit was a combat support unit. So for military police officers, that meant convoy security, that meant EPW camps. So really the roles that I was in a supporting role from a security standpoint, whether that was supply missions or dignitaries or, important people being transferred here, there, or anywhere. And then in the corrections. So we were the first unit that went into the Abu Ghraib prison. It was rubble and trash. And I remember seeing rabid dogs running around with miscellaneous things in their mouth and thinking this is where we're going to live. But we stood that operation up. And, it's interesting and something I'd love to even kind of dive into. For the last, 20 plus years, I've always gotten to this defensive stance when I talk about my military career, because the unit that came in and allowed us to come home from that mission tainted the mission. And so anytime anyone hears the words Abu Ghraib, they automatically think of the scandal that went there. And I immediately have to go into, well, I wasn't the unit that did that. And so it's been an interesting journey over the last 20 years of me even like publicly relating or acknowledging that I am a veteran.
Yeah. So before we started the podcast series, I talked about why I'm even doing this, right? Why Women of War is a platform that I wanted to bring to life, because women veterans are invisible, right? When you say military veteran, oftentimes, I guarantee you 99% of the time, what comes to mind? A male, never a female, and just exactly what you said. One of the reasons, and oftentimes I hear women do not want to identify of being a veteran for whatever reason. There's many reasons we can dig into. Curious as to why you didn't want to share, loudly, boldly that, hey, I'm a military veteran. I served in the United States Army.
I was tired of defending myself, quite frankly. Like I said, I almost automatically got into this defensive stance, and I felt like I was always on this very exhausting defending myself from really nobody, but I felt like I had to defend my service, defend my unit, defend the mission. And I think I just got tired of it. And then on the flip side, which I know so many female veterans have dealt with, is the looks or the gestures or even the comments really of disbelief that not only am I a veteran, I'm a combat veteran. And I think it just eventually got easier to just disengage from that attribute than it was to explain myself or defend myself or elaborate to someone.
Yeah. So talk to me, because I'm pretty certain that I could probably just go yes to all of it. Talk to me about what were those comments that you got?
So I have the first moment that I pulled into a Lowe's parking lot and parked in the veteran parking spot and got out of my truck, and this gentleman kind of approached me, and I mean, it was the middle of the day, so I wasn't like threatened or anything, but he literally came at me and said, "Hey, you can't park there. That's reserved for veterans." Just assumed right out of the gate that I wasn't a veteran because I was a younger woman, white woman. And I don't know, it just really caught me off guard. And I was so confused and thinking to myself, like, I have integrity. Like, why are you challenging me here? But I looked at him and I was like, I am a veteran. And the confusion on his face was like, well, how are you a veteran? And it was just so off-putting. But, not only that, just going, to stores and being asked, oh, are you a veteran? We have a discount or a program or something. And, just the disbelief. I hear it from women, female veterans a lot. Oh, thank your husband for his service when they pull, in or out of their vehicle, with disabled veteran or veteran plates, right? Have you ever experienced that?
Oh yes. The parking situation. I laugh all the time. In fact, I did a story with Fox News here locally, specifically about parking spots, because that is always, I don't even park in those spots because every single time that I do, I get such hate. The comments of like, hey, you can't park there. You got to park with your hero. That's for heroes. Where's your husband? And I'm like,
yeah,
buddy, I'm the veteran. I actually got to park there.
The stigma is real. I did
100%.
I did a short film with Patton's Veteran Project. Have you heard of that organization?
No, I haven't.
So, God, I can't remember his first name right now. But anyway, he's the grandson of General Patton, the infamous General Patton. And he started Patton's Veteran Project. And he goes around and they have like short, like 2 to 3 minute films that they create with veterans to help share in their story. And so I did one last year, and it's called I Am a Veteran. And it's all around pulling into a Lowe's parking lot and being, challenged and questioned. And the point, you guys should go watch it, but the point of the video is, instead of assuming that I'm not, assume that I am, and then take it one step further and maybe ask, what that veteran's story is. Because I notice, and, just throwing this out there, that the default when a person learns that you are a veteran is to thank you for your service. And while I appreciate it, I also think it's such a cop-out. I think it's such an easy way to acknowledge you, but also semi-dismiss you. And I challenge the entire world, for that matter, if you even have just 2 extra minutes, instead of saying, oh, just thank you for your service, ask the veteran what their story is and leave it open-ended. Dave Nordell talks about this all the time. Just leave it open-ended. The veteran will share what they want to share. If they want to go into detail or if there's time, then they will. If they don't, then they won't. But it helps us as veterans feel not only acknowledged, but heard. And especially as a woman veteran, as you've already mentioned and alluded to, like, we feel invisible and unheard and unseen more often than not.
And I would further that. I think oftentimes people just don't know what to say. So I
Right.
think that's just the easy thing to say. It's also like, when it comes to grief, right? When someone says like, I lost somebody, and you're just kind of stuck with the deer in the headlight moment of like, ooh, what am I supposed to say? And absolutely, I think it's leading with curiosity but with curiosity of open-mindedness and love.
Yeah.
And just be able to say, hey, I would like to know more. What was it that you did? Would like to know what was your service like? And absolutely, I do appreciate the fact that they are thankful, because we do know there was a whole generation that didn't get to experience that. The Vietnam veterans did not get to experience the same type of appreciation that our generation, this global war and terrorism generation, has come to know. And so I do acknowledge that, and I do appreciate that. But absolutely would love to be able to take it one step further. And I would even say another step further to that is, give of your time, give of your effort, and give of your money. And when I say that, people kind of kind of shrink back from that and they think like that's impossible or too hard. And I break it down to this: the next time you give of your time, instead of doom scrolling, give of that 5-10 minutes of working with a military veteran organization of your time and volunteer. The next time you choose to go get a latte or that beer after work, give that to a veteran organization. It's not that I'm asking you to give hundreds of dollars. If everybody, you plus 10 of your friends, gave $10, how much further could we go? That's what I mean of giving of your time and of your money.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I challenge people all the time to consider that. And I think a lot of times we feel like we have to give such a substantial amount of time or money. But like you said, if everyone contributed a few bucks here and there, then, things would be a lot better. And time is just as valuable. Most organizations run strictly off volunteers, and they wouldn't exist without their volunteers. And I think also just getting involved as a volunteer is going to open your eyes up to so much more, and you're going to get just as much value out of it as the organization has with you volunteering.
Absolutely. So talk to me about, we always talk about those war stories, right? The guys sit around. So this is our chance. The girls are sitting around. Talk to me about a time that you often reflect on in your time in service that you're just like, there's this one time, there I was. And where was that there I was moment for you that you just, you reference back, you kind of get a good chuckle and you're just like, man, that's that moment that you just wish, not that you want to redo in your life, but that you just kind of go back to, that you're just like, I love that moment because it was the people, where I was at, how I felt. What was that for you?
Gosh, there's a couple ones that come to mind. One that, I miss the camaraderie and the training and would go back as long as I could also go back to that age, right? Because my body just isn't the same anymore. And then there's another moment that pops in my head that I'm like, I would never want to live that again, but it's kind of funny. So, just training. My maiden name is Ryan. And when I went into the military, I believe Saving Private Ryan had just come out. And I was like, oh, Lord, I'm going to go to basic training and my drill sergeants are going to be like, there's going to be a whole Saving Private Ryan thing, right? My drill sergeants never said a word, not one thing. Maybe they didn't have time and never saw the movie. I don't know, but I was very appreciative of it. But when I went to my unit and we were training up in Fort Lewis and we did this whole ops where, of course, I'm the one that ends up getting captured from an LPOP and, then it was just this whole training mission. And at the end of it, they deemed the mission Saving Private Ryan. So it was funny because the OP4, we didn't know when they stopped role playing and when they picked it up. And I was there with one of my team leads and, anyway, let me back up. So we're in an LPOP, a lookout. I guess I should maybe speak a little bit civilian terminology. It's basically you're kind of hidden and you're overseeing or overlooking the enemy or event, location, what have you. So anyway, my team lead and I end up getting captured. It was kind of the part of the mission to just see how the entire unit responded. And we're sitting at the OP4 camp, the play enemy camp, and they were like offering us food. They were like, oh, okay, guys, it was raining. Go figure, Fort Lewis, Washington. But, and we're just like miserable. We're hungry. And Sarnkar and I are looking at each other like, do we eat? Or is this a trick? Are they going to be like, oh, that was poison. Now you're dead. Like, we didn't know where the lines crossed. And like, we're just like, we're starved because we've been out in, a foxhole for hours, didn't have any food. Anyway, long story short, we ended up getting loose out of our restraints and we just like took off running down the hill, and the code word was Elvis. So I'm just down the hill running at top speed to like where our camp was set up, yelling Elvis so that they'd let me through the thing. So that's just it's a funny story that I'll always remember because it was, the whole Saving Private Ryan thing and preparing us for that in a real world scenario, though, that training also significantly prepared me for the worst case scenario when we got deployed. And so I'm thankful that one, we never had to play out that actual mission, but thankful for the training and the camaraderie. Now, going into real world war scenario, something that will always stick with me, and I know you'll probably start to smirk when I say this, is the bathroom situation in Iraq. And, you know, depending on the branch of service that you're in, you could have the luxury of an actual bathroom, or quite frankly, the luxury of a porta potty at that point. And I know your listeners might be saying, Dallas, what do you mean the luxury of a porta potty? Believe me, a porta potty was a luxury in '03. Okay.
Yes, it was.
But I just remember we were at Fort Cropper, and being like, okay, where are the latrines? And, you know, there's just a couple signs pointed, oh, this way. And you're just like walking and going, and you're like, where the hell? And then there was just this big long ditch, just like dug for like a quarter mile. And I'm like, and then there's just like 3 by 3 foot like boxes. Okay. Imagine like a 3 foot square box, but no top on it. And that's just like sporadically placed along this long ditch. And then take a 5-gallon bucket, cut the hole out of the top, flip it over, and put it on top of this ditch. And that was our toilet. And so you would sit on the toilet. You could literally look down the line left and right and see all your people using the bathroom. And there was no women's or men's. It was just a situation, like we were fresh in Iraq, and that was what they did. And, you know, I think the only time in my life that I was ever like, God, I wish I was a man, was anytime I had to use the bathroom in country, right? Like it was like I was envious of how much easier guys had it, and also appreciated all the things. But anyway, it's something that will torment me probably for the rest of my life. And also every time I see a porta potty, because we eventually got them like 6 months in, and it was like the best thing ever. I was so excited to have a porta potty
with 4 walls,
and not have to look to my left or right and see people, you know, also pretending that you don't see them, just with blinders on.
I am dying over here because as you're telling this, it's like flashbacks of my own experience.
Sorry to trigger you. Trigger warning.
That is like, I'm like, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. While I wasn't at the same forward operating base that you were at, I was not too far. That was kind of what I was experiencing.
Yeah.
And yes, going to the bathroom has always not been fun as a woman. And in fact, so much so, you know, when we talk about health, you had mentioned earlier, you know, you wish that you were younger because your younger body could do so much, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm in my late 40s now, and yes, 100%. And I have 3 trainers, right? I have these trainers that I work with because I've gotten into pageantry, modeling, and now bodybuilding. And all of my trainers are like, Olivia, you stink at drinking water. What is wrong with you? Why can you not drink water? Like, I struggle to drink 16 ounces of water in a day. I could drink 2 or 3 cups of coffee in a day, but water?
I'm laughing because
what is wrong?
Look, my water's full, but my coffee's almost empty.
Right? And all of them ask me, they're like, what is wrong with you? Why can you not drink water? And I'll have water in front of me all day long. I'll bring it around. It's like carrying my purse. You know, instead of a purse, it's a jug of water. I'm like, I have trained myself over 20 plus years, you know, if you add in my cadet time, not to drink water because I was the only woman. And it was such a pain in the butt to like have to pull down your pants while the guys could just kind of whip it out and go. And they're yelling at you. Like when my maiden name was McNeilis, is like, hurry up, McNeilis. And you're like, and also in Iraq, that whole situation of just like having to bear it all on these like, you know, makeshift toilets. So yes, 100% where you're just like, oh, how about I just don't drink any fluids and then I don't have to go.
Yeah, you know, I never really thought about it that way, but I very much resonate with all of that. That's probably why I also struggle drinking water. You just, you know, train yourself not to drink water, then you have to go to the bathroom as often.
Yeah, 100%. So tell me, When was it for you that you were like, I'm good. It's time for me to hang up my boots. And then after you decided that, what did you transition to?
Yeah, so 2005, yeah, 2005, I got out of active duty and went into the National Guard in Nevada. And I also had my oldest son that year. And I was working on active duty special work orders for the state under the counter drug task force. I was still trying to work my way to be working with the DEA. So I was still pursuing my degree and was still wanting to be in the military, but wanted to go to school full time. So this was the scenario that I laid out. I'd be in the guard, but active duty, and that way I'd still recurring my retirement points if I decided to stay in and go to school. Anyway, with the counter drug program, I was teaching eighth graders essentially like the DARE, an advanced DARE program. And then in the summer, we would put on these SOAR camps. I forget what SOAR stands for because, military and acronyms and all. But essentially, we would take in adolescents that were in the juvenile justice system and put them through a 3-day boot camp and military style and try to help them basically find their way. It was kind of like the judges, like, you graduate this program or you end up in juvie. And so with that, I loved it. It got educated more on the harms of drugs and the effects of drugs, and then got to work with youth. And honestly, I was just walking down the hall one day and heard one of the chiefs, because it was, mixed Air Force and Army, heard one of the chiefs talking about an intelligence position opening up. And I did one of those and backed it up and inquired about what he was talking about. And he said, oh, we have 2 positions, National Guard positions over at the DEA office as intelligence analysts. And one of the positions opened up and I expressed my interest. I had to go over and talk to the DEA manager. And long story short, I got put on 1-year orders to work at the DEA office as a National Guard intelligence analyst. They sent me to school, everything. It was like the best of both worlds. I was actively working with the DEA and I was still in the military. And so fast forward to 2007, my contract with the military was ending. I was going to ETS and things were really starting to kick up in Afghanistan again. And I mean, my unit was already getting preliminary warning orders and my son was 2 years old. And I just remember thinking, I can't leave him for a year. I was a single mom. And I think that was the pivotal point. I really decided to get out of the military because of my son. And I figured, I had I've talked about it with other veterans, who decide to get out or they're medically discharged and then their unit deploys again. And it's very similar to kind of like a survivor's guilt where you're home, but your unit's there. And I have it being home. Actually, let me back up. So I ended up ETSing. I got on a full-time position with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, assigned to the DEA with the help of my then manager, and transitioned into the civilian role. But I remember thinking our, friends and family that are home during our deployments had a much tougher job. And I know that sounds almost kind of ludicrous, but I feel like they had a much tougher job than we did being deployed, because being deployed, you're mission focused, your schedule is very regiment. You know what you're going to wake up and do and where and eat or not eat, and you just go about the mission. And those of us that are home while our loved ones are deployed are just kind of sitting around wondering. And then the news comes on and you don't know how real that story is or fabricated or blown out of proportion. And my hat's off to everyone that really that has loved ones, family, friends that are deployed, and they sit here and they back home and they support us, because I feel like it's much harder to be home than it is to be deployed.
I've heard that before. So like I mentioned before, 3 deployments to Iraq, and I was married to another military officer, and he had did two. And so when I went forward to my third one, he was home because he was going to grad school, and he even said that too. He was like, Olivia, I would have much rather have gone forward with you than be at home. He's like, this home part is tough. And hats off to the military spouses that stay home and have to, take care of the home front, because it is 100% harder. I
Yeah.
know that's crazy for anyone who's never gone to the front lines, because you that's hard to imagine when you've never seen the front lines, or combat experience. But like you said, there is a mission that you understand. There's a regiment to that. And as much as that's chaos, because it is, there's a control chaos to that.
Yeah.
And there's peace is probably not the right word, but I don't know how to describe it if you've never been there, where it just runs on this wheel, if you will. And it's simple. It's a simplified life because all the other distractions are removed, because everything is just forward focused on that mission. You don't have everything else that's surrounding your life. And as you're saying that, I'm like, yes, I've heard that before, and I can totally relate to that.
Yeah. So yeah, I stayed home. My unit did end up getting deployed in 2008, and and again, I think in 2010. And so I tried to be the best now civilian, right, that I could be. And I knew things that of course, during that time, email became more proficient in communication. It wasn't, handwritten letters, being mailed back and forth, but I tried to be the best civilian. But at the same time, I started, pursuing my career with the DEA, and it was a little bit different avenue than what I had set out to be, or to accomplish, being that I went I got hired on by the police department and then was appointed to the DEA in that position. But if it wasn't for the military and my training and the opportunity to be on, the National Guard, active duty orders and all of that, I don't know what would have happened. So that was technically my transition into civilian life, but I don't really feel like I had a proper transition into civilian life until I left law enforcement and went into corporate America.
So you've done military, you went into corporate, and what prompted you to write a book? Because you're an author, you're a published author. What was that nudge? Why did you wake up? You're like, I'm going to write a book.
Yeah, I never woke up and said, I think I want to write a book. But there are two factors that play into how it came to fruition. First, so when I went into corporate America in 2014, quite frankly, I was struggling. And even though I'd been out of the military for, almost a decade, I could not relate to this new world. I felt completely out of my league. I didn't feel qualified, quite frankly, which was silly because they headhunted me and hired me, right? So I should have felt like, okay, I'm supposed to be here. But anyhow, I was dealing with imposter syndrome and all of these things. And I had a mentor and an evaluator while I was in sales school that was a Vietnam veteran. And he kind of pulled me off to the side and we got chatting, and he learned that I was also a veteran, and he, just kind of helped guide me. And it really was just interesting enough, just a change of terminology. So, and this is a sidebar, but a lot of veterans struggle, myself included, with, looking at a job announcement, right? And then looking at their military resume and aligning that with each other. And it's just a flip of, terminology. You can look at military job description and turn it into civilian terms, and you'll see that you're very well qualified for a lot of civilian jobs. So I challenge you to do that if you are, struggling as a veteran to try and find your place in the civilian world. But anyhow, he helped me through all of that. And somehow he learned that I kept a journal. Obviously I shared with him, but I don't remember how it came up in conversation, that I kept a journal during my deployment in '03. And he made some comment about, oh, you should publish that. And I remember laughing and calling him crazy, because really it was me going into like trauma response of, I'm not opening that journal because that means I would have to read it and relive it and feel it and all those things. So I told him that he was nuts. And no, sidebar, he had a passion project of a publishing company. So that was kind of why he threw that wrench in the fire. So fast forward about 8-9 years later, and I found myself at my bare bottom. We a lot of times stuff everything down, and I feel like the military does a really great job at training us and preparing us for war, essentially, by telling us, like, don't wear your emotions on the surface or your heart on your sleeve. And they tell us and train us to that those things present weaknesses. But what they don't do a good job at is unraveling all of that, right? Like, we transition out of the military and we're not taught how to process emotions and feel those things and convey those feelings again. And so for 20 years, I had just stuffed all of that down. And I found myself in a really bad, toxic, abusive marriage. And it was kind of the straw that just broke the camel's back. I was suicidal and was in the darkest place of my life. And somehow I managed to crawl my way out of that dark hole and separated from my, at the time, husband. And with that, I sought help. I, for the first time, started therapy and started peeling back all these layers. And I thought the majority of it was the toxic marriage and even some childhood trauma. And as we started peeling back layers, my military service came and smacked me dead in the face. And at that time, I kind of decided, you know what? I'm going to face this head on. I'm going to just dive back into it and feel all the feels. And so I decided to read the journal that I kept during the deployment. And as I went through it, I was just going to feel all the feelings, give myself that grace, and walk through it. But that little seed that Bob Babcock, my Vietnam veteran mentor, had, kind of planted in my head years prior, was like, well, Dallas, if you're going to do that, why don't you go ahead and just transcribe it into a digital copy just in case? So the way I did it is I would open the journal and read it out loud and have my iPad transcribe it into text. And then I'd read back through it and make sure it was right, which at the time I didn't realize how much more impactful that would be. Anytime you say anything out loud, it hits you just a little bit harder. And so it took me 6 months to get through 89 journal entries. But at the end of it, I had transcribed it all. I had quit once, took a 2-week break. I thought I was quitting. Therapy helped me work through it. I hit a really hard day from my deployment that I didn't want to relive again. But anyway, I ended up calling Bob Babcock 9 years later. And he at that time was now like 83 or 84 years old. And I had to kind of walk him down memory lane and have him remember who I even was. And he said, oh, Dallas, because I told him, I said, listen, you planted the seed in my head, and now I've done all this work, and I'm interested in having a conversation about what that might look like. And so he said, send me your manuscript and I'll take a read of it and we'll go from there. He called me the very next morning and said, Dallas, I now remember, and you absolutely have to publish this. The world needs to hear the story, not only of a female veteran, but of a 19-year-old girl, just basically a day in the life in a combat zone. And with his confidence in me, because I didn't necessarily have it in myself, we moved forward and we essentially published the journal that I kept in '03. in 2023. So almost exactly 20 years later. It's called Shattered Reflections, because that's exactly how it felt. And I, on top of the raw contents of the journal, as I went through it, I provided footnotes for each journal entry. And I provided either a little bit more context of what I was talking about, or just kind of my reflections on rereading it back, which 20 years later as a, more of a mature, wiser woman, because I very much was this very immature, naive 19-year-old girl writing in her diary, essentially. So yeah, quite frankly, it helped me process a lot of, we'll call it trauma. It's absolutely trauma, no need
But it was
to.
healing for you.
Yeah. It was very healing for me. But with that, it felt like I had been honestly carrying around this like ruck, right? That I didn't even know for so many years. And I just finally was able to just take it off and take a full breath.
That's amazing. I read your book, and I would highly recommend that people have the opportunity to sit down and to read your book. But so not only are you a published author, but you do a lot of work in the veteran space. So talk
Yeah.
to me about your Yellowstone Valley project.
Yeah. So with the book, feeling that like really almost physical feeling of taking that ruck off, I thought to myself, gosh, there must be so many other women that feel this way, right? Like they've been carrying around this bag of emotions and burdens and invalidness and just all this unworthy feeling. Because I finally, with that book being published, I felt heard and I felt seen. And as silly as it may sound, this Vietnam veteran who had seen God knows what, right? I think, like you already kind of alluded, had probably one of the worst experiences in war, because not only did they go fight for our country, they came back and they weren't welcomed home. But like he validated everything that I had felt and been through. And so with that, I said, there must be other women that feel this way. I want to help them. I want to help them take that ruck off. And so I launched a podcast. And I just went out and I invited other female combat veterans to come in and share their story in a safe space. I felt like I had already opened that door and kind of took that first step of vulnerability. And my hope was that they would see that and feel that and then trust me to also be vulnerable. And we've launched 10 episodes, just women who want to come and share their story and feel heard and be, out there documented, if you will. And as I started hearing, I think we were about the 4th episode in, that analyst brain started picking up, because I started hearing the same thing. I started seeing patterns. I started hearing patterns, not only like myself resonating with what they were saying, but they were all kind of saying the same thing. And it was, that they felt invalid, unworthy, unheard, a lot of the same experiences, a lot of things that you and I have chatted about today. And I'm like, there must be something out there, right, that helps, that I can point these women to. And so I went looking for resources. And unfortunately, what I found was not a lot. There weren't a lot of resources that were specific for female veterans, let alone specific for female combat veterans in what they were feeling. And there were 2 primary things that I was looking for when I was looking for resources. Because don't get me wrong, there's a ton of veteran resources out there. But there were 2 things specifically. One is that I was hearing that women had lost their sense of femininity. They either didn't understand, didn't know, or didn't embrace what it was like to be a woman again, or ever, right? A lot of us went in the military when we were 17, 18 years old, and we were just trained to be what the military wanted us to be. God forbid we put on heels, a dress, and lipstick every now and then. Like it was uncomfortable feeling, right? So there was that. And so I was looking for resources that really like helped that with that. Didn't find anything. And then the second was, I was appalled at the amount of women that were sharing with me that they had experienced military sexual trauma. And, the VA reports 1 in 3, but I was hearing 85 to 90% of all the women chatting with me saying that they had experienced MST. And I was just like, time out. Like, why is this not being talked about? Why are there not programs specific for this? Like, what is going on? So with that in mind, I said, at one point, I guess I said, screw it, I'll do it myself. And I designed a program based on all of the healing remedies that I had gone through in the last couple of years, and designed to fit what I was hearing, the pain points and challenges of our fellow sisters in arms. And at the ground floor of this retreat, this wellness program that I developed, was a feminine foundation. I really wanted it to be about the woman first and the veteran second. And so the Not So Average Jane retreat was born. And we, initially I was like, okay, I'm just going to do like a retreat a year. And I was working underneath the umbrella of another veteran organization as my fiscal sponsor. And as I was talking about it more and spreading the news of what I was doing and was on some podcasts and this, that, and the other, I started getting phone calls and emails and text messages a lot. And they almost all started out the same. And it was, I'm a female veteran and I'm dealing with a lot of the things that you're talking about, but I'm not a combat veteran. And so there was just a light bulb that went off in my head that said, okay, yes, I want to help this niche group of women that are like, I understand and want to serve, but I think there's a bigger community of women that I also need to serve. So with that in mind, I knew that with this niche, I wasn't going to be able to do so under another organization's umbrella. And I launched Operation Juliet October of last year. So that's the nonprofit. And then this past June, we hosted our very first retreat, and we served 10 female combat veterans. And it was the most magical 5 days of my life. And if I just decided to not do anything ever again in my life, like that was just the icing on the cake for me, to be able to serve these women and help them through some darkness and to show them that they're not alone and to give them some really great tools that they, have taken home with them and continue to leverage. So that's kind of in a nutshell, not a really big nutshell.
I saw the growth of this, and
Yeah.
I was so excited what you were doing. And so, so super excited for the growth, but I totally resonate with a lot of that. And so I was like, I would love to see the growth of it, would love to be able to go to it, because, there are so many of us that resonate on so many levels. Having more in the uniform. I could spend all day talking with you.
Yeah.
In fact, I know that we've done that before, but, Dallas, you are an incredible woman, a fellow sister in arms. You've, have some great stories. We've walked down memory lane. But, thank you for what you continuously do for us women that have served, for the fellowship that you provide. Thank you for spending time with me and sharing your story. And yeah, I look forward to seeing all the great things that is going to come to fruition.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your support. You supported from the beginning. I have like at least 5 ideas that I want to run by you offline. So I'm excited to chat with you. Yeah. Thank you for having me on and letting me share my story and share a little bit about Operation Juliet. And yeah.
This was another great episode of the Women of War podcast series. Continue to listen, because I still have more stories coming at you.